and certainly helps everyone else also. So, my dear friends, Vaishnavas, we are so fortunate and blessed today. His Grace Gopal Hari Prabhu is there with us. He accepted our proposal to speak on Krishna Katha on this topic of the ideal family life. And I was thinking, it is such an apt topic actually to hear about the duties of in the Grihastha ashram from such a wonderful devotee like Gopal Hari Prabhu. So, who is born, you know, I, we all started reading Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam at a very late age, probably, but His Grace Gopal Hari Prabhu, following the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj, was hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam right from the womb of her mother, Her Grace Aruda Mataji. And most of you know that they do wonderful homeschooling seminars, and because both Gopal Hari Prabhu and his elder brother, His Grace Radhika Raman Prabhu, have been homeschooled through Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is their life and soul. They have lived, breathed, and drunk at every swadu swadu pade pade. At every step, they have been drinking Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, living Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, practicing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Is a very dear disciple of His Holiness Gopal Kṛṣṇa Goswami Maharaj, and his good wife, Her Grace Devi Murti Mataji, is also a wonderful Vaishnavi. And their two wonderful kids, Sita Devi and Balram Prabhu. Balram Prabhu recently came to this world, so we are so blessed, honored, and grateful, Prabhu, that you are here. And of course, from the material side, he's like a perfect person, ideal gentleman. He's a PhD in religious studies from Oxford University, and he's a professor, assistant professor in Indianapolis. I was very, very fortunate that Gopal Hari Prabhu was there in Florida for almost 1 year, and we had a lot of wonderful time, and I still relish those memories. But maybe because of the anarthas I have and my shortcomings, Krishna arranged for him to move to Indianapolis, and now he's building such a nice Vaishnava community there. And I can go on and on, but we want to hear from Gopal Hari Prabhu. So we kindly welcome you, Prabhu, with a garland of words and gratitude from our heart. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. We're so blessed and grateful to you. Hare Krishna, please continue.
Thank you, Prabhu, and thank you for the very generous introduction, which is really not worthy of me, but it's just your own kindness to see some positive quality in me. It's really my honor, and it's really a pleasure to join this group. I also see Nandini Kishori Mataji, Hare Krishna Mataji. It's so nice to see you. After a long time, actually, we keep on hearing about your glorious services from all around the world, and she inspires us so much. And then Shubha Vilas Prabhu, I was, like you mentioned, I was there for 1 year, and in his life there's only auspiciousness, and the reason is because he's Nityam Bhagvata Sevaya. He's so dedicated in his daily reading and service and discussion of the Bhagavatam. And I think when I was there, this group was like 4 or 5 people. And now with his steadiness, he's expanded it to so many people. And he's just an ocean of rasa, because he's reading Bhagavatam all the time. So Prabhu, thank you for inspiring me by engaging me in this service. Hare Krishna. So do you normally just start with the verse, or how would you like to start? I apologize, I'm a few minutes late. My computer froze, I had to restart it. So do you normally sing Jai Radha Madhav, or we could skip it this time if it's late, or however you would like?
We can skip Jai Radha Madhav to Om Namo Bhagavate and the verse, and Mangala Sharan we can do, and we can then. Yes.
Would you like to share the verse? I can share it also. I have it on my screen. Whatever.
Yeah, I have it ready, Prabhu. I'll share.
Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 11, Text 29. And should I just recite the verse or do you repeat also?
You can just do, Prabhu.
Ya patim hari bhavena bhajit shir iva tatpara haryatmana harir loke patya shir iva modate. Ya patim hari bhavena bhajit shir iva tatpara haryatmana harir loke patya shir iva modate. Ya patim hari bhavena bhajit shiriva tatpara haryatmana harir loke patya shiriva modate. Word for word meaning. Ya, any woman who, patim, her husband, haribhavena, mentally accepting him as equal to Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhajet, worships or renders service to. Shri Iva, exactly like the goddess of fortune. Tatpara, being devoted. Haryatmana, completely absorbed in the thoughts of Hari. Hare Loke, in the spiritual world, the Vaikuntha planets. Patya, with her husband. Shri Iva, exactly like the goddess of fortune. Modate, enjoys spiritual eternal life. So now translation appropriate by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So initially when Shubha Vilas Prabhu asked me to speak on this verse, I almost fainted. But then I thought that actually I'd written a essay on this topic. So it's actually, the Bhagavatam is actually, the best, you could say, source of wisdom or guidance on issues like this also. So we will look at some of this. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. The woman who engages in the service of her husband, following strictly in the footsteps of the goddess of fortune, surely returns home back to Godhead with her devotee husband and lives very happily in the Vaikuntha planets. Once again, the woman who engages in the service of her husband, following strictly in the footsteps of the goddess of fortune, surely returns home back to Godhead with her devotee husband and lives very happily in the Vaikuntha planets. Purport. The faithfulness of the goddess of fortune is the ideal for a chaste woman. The Brahma Samhita 529 says, Lakshmi Sahasra Shatasam Brahmase Vimanam. In the Vaikuntha planets, Lord Vishnu is worshipped by many, many thousands of goddesses of fortune. And in Golok Vrindavan, Lord Kṛṣṇa is worshipped by many, many thousands of gopis, all of whom are goddesses of fortune. A woman should serve her husband as faithfully as a goddess of fortune. A man should be an ideal servant of the Lord. And a woman should be an ideal wife like the goddess of fortune. Then both husband and wife will be so faithful and strong that by acting together, they will return home back to Godhead without a doubt. In this regard, Srila Madhvacharya gives this opinion. Harir asmin sthita iti strinam bhartari bhavana shishyanam cha gurau nityam shudranam brahma nadishu Prityanam swamini tatha hari bhava udirita. A woman should think of her husband as the Supreme Lord. Similarly, a disciple should think of the spiritual master as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A Shudra should think of a Brahmana as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and a servant should think of his master as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this way, all of them will automatically become devotees of the Lord. In other words, by thinking this way, all of them will become Krishna conscious. Om Gyanam Timarandasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishnam Sthapitam Swayam Rupa Kadam Mayam Tadati Swapadam. So this verse here is, you could say, a very difficult verse because it has many facets to it. And on one hand, it's a very, you could say, very blissful, very positive verse. But on the other hand, it's also a very difficult verse because it's making, you could say, what they say, a homology. It's making sort of a, in the purport and in the translation, it's sort of suggesting that the role of a woman towards her husband, a wife towards her husband, is like the role of a servant to the master. And that is, you could say, difficult to appreciate, or you could say understand in today's society. On the other hand, the verse is giving a very, you could say, wonderful message that many times as devotees, aspiring devotees, devotee families, we sometimes wonder that in the future, will we ever see each other after death? Is there some future to our family life? And in the Bhagavatam, we read so many places that family life is illusory, it's temporary, it's just false attachment. And this is all very true, that it's, it just, we've had so many mothers, so many fathers, yet at the same time, we have so much affection between each other. And we think, is it just really all just fleeting affection? So here in the Bhagavatam, it's being said that in the case of a relationship between devotees, and in the case of a husband and wife relationship between devotees, that relationship can actually continue on for eternity. I mean, that relationship is eternal. The relationship amongst devotee family members is eternal. Because here it's being said that if everyone in the family performs their service to the Supreme Lord, performs their service to Kṛṣṇa, in the Vaikuntha planets, they will continue. They will continue assisting one another in their service to the Lord. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada has said, I've also heard other sannyasis, other gurus, other great souls in our movement say this, that relationships between devotee family members become spiritual. From becoming material, they actually become spiritual. Because no longer is that a material relationship. The relationship is based on their service to the Lord. And even if that material sort of relationship sheds off, where in the spiritual world, one is no longer husband and wife, but maybe friend and friend, that spiritual relationship will continue. And this is why, actually, it's also a great warning for us. Why, as husband or wife, or son or father or parent, we cannot misuse, or we cannot act improperly in our devotee relationships, because they're so significant. These are eternal relationships with our family members. If our family members are devotees, these are not just our temporary, you could say, material here and there. It is actually an eternal relationship. And that relationship has to be taken very seriously. The other devotee in that relationship has to be taken very seriously. So clearly, someone could misapply and misuse this verse, especially a very misogynist husband could do that. That, now this is saying that my wife is my servant. But it's also saying very clearly that this relationship is eternal, and these are relationships between devotees, and therefore in the spiritual world, amongst devotees, that relationship will continue. And naturally, we cannot go to the spiritual world if we are not acting properly towards other devotees. So it's also a great warning to us that our entrance to the spiritual world depends upon how we treat one another in our family life. Sometimes we see this is the case with, unfortunately, quite a few devotees, that sometimes we see devotees are very ideal in terms of their relationships with other devotees, in terms of their presence in ISKCON or their services in ISKCON. But in terms of their relationships with their family members, they are a different person. They're not practicing the same principle of kindness or tolerance, of humility with their family members. So that's based upon a misunderstanding, because our immediate devotee association, the most important devotees in our life, are our family members. So if we mistreat one devotee but accept another devotee, then Krishna will not accept that service. And ultimately, those devotees fall down. I knew one very great devotee in our movement. He was a spiritual master, he had many disciples, but he would be, compassionate and kind to everyone except for his wife. And later on, he fell down. He had serious spiritual problems and he fell down. He lost all of his disciples. He lost his position in ISKCON. Because Krishna is very smart. You see, he's more smart than we are. We are, we are putting a facade and we are getting away from it, away with it. But Krishna knows that no, actually, there's a deep anartha there. And though we are externally doing so many things, Krishna will see that weakness, that you could say that double standard, and he will he will remove that facade. So with every devotee, we have to be very ideal. So now on this verse, as to how to explain, how to understand these verses, which is a set of verses in the light of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So one way we could understand this is that here the duties of the wife towards her husband are being described. And those duties, there's a very, you could say, high expectation or platform. But then we could also look at the duties of the husband towards the wife. Just like they say, it's a common joke in India that every man wants his wife to be like Sita is to Ram. But then every wife tells her husband, you be Ram and then I'll be Sita. Right? So we can look at what are the duties of the husband towards the wife. So that is definitely a very important point, a very important principle. But even before that, we have to understand what we mean by wife or husband. And even before that, even just in terms of the wife's duty towards her husband, we have to, I want to see with you that what is the Bhagavatam saying? They say every text has a context. Similarly, every verse has a context. And all of Shastra always has to be understood and accepted in context. So if we take a verse separately, it can be, very bewildering to us. But if we see that verse in context, then that verse will make more sense to us. So I want to just spend a few minutes on this because it's actually very interesting. It's actually the fact that the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is actually the most balanced scripture. Unlike other scriptures, in Vedic literature, you have scriptures like the Manusmriti and Dharma Shastras that are clearly biased toward the men. They were written for a certain time, a place, but Bhagavatam is not like that. Bhagavatam is perfectly balanced. And that's something that I want to clarify, look into here. So this verse is being spoken by Narad Muni to Maharaj Yudhishthir. And he then quotes also Lord Narayan, Lord Vishnu in the midst of this discussion. So it's similar discussions take place in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And one way that, in general, you could say the woman is characterized in the Bhagavatam is as Maya. We say that women are Maya. The form of a woman is Maya for a man. So this is the first point, that why women are being called Maya, when it's no fault of their own. So it's very interesting that the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, while calling women Maya, also calls men Maya for the woman. And I want to highlight this statement. So before we do that, just an example of where sort of women are seen as a trap, are seen as Maya, for, you could say, the ascending male who wants to perform austerities. One example of this imagery is where in the Samudra Manthan, Mount Meru, there the Asuras and the Devas, they are churning the ocean of milk, right? They're churning the ocean of milk to get the nectar from the ocean. And so many things come out as a result of that churning. And then at a certain point, the nectar comes out, and the Asuras, being very quick, they grab the nectar and they run off with the nectar. And once they've run out, then the Devas, they think, what should be done? They're taking the nectar. If these Asuras become immortal, then this entire universe will go in disrepair. So they start to pray to the Lord. They say, "Oh, Lord Vishnu, please come and help us." So on the spot, it's you could say one of the quickest incarnations of the Lord. Krishna takes the form of Mohini Murti, the most beautiful, in some ways, incarnation of the Lord, as the most enchanting Mohini Murti. So he comes down as Mohini Murti, and he, as Mohini, walks in front of the Devas and the Asuras. And it's described that that the Devas, because they were godly, they did not become infatuated by Mohini Murti's beauty. Because they had a higher spiritual realization, and because they had some appreciation, or you could say experience, of the beauty of the Lord, they did not become enchanted by Mohini as a woman, so to say. They were, impressed by the beauty of the Lord, but they didn't become enchanted or lustful towards Mohini. But the demons, because they were attracted by the form of the woman, because they were attracted by Mohini's beauty, they became fully bewildered, and they sort of lost all consciousness of where that pot is, how do you keep it, and all these things. And so in that moment, then Mohini takes that pot from them and then hands it over to the Devas. So in the purports and in the verses, we see that there's a very great metaphor here and a very great instruction here, that those who become enchanted by the form of a woman, for them, that enchantment is death, right? They lost the immortality, they lost the nectar, and they got only death, so to say, like temporality. And those who are not attracted, they got immortality, the Devas. And that's the defining feature also difference between the Devas and the Asuras. Although the Devas also fall for it, but generally speaking, they are more self-realized, and so they received the nectar because they were not attracted to women. So attachment to women in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is compared to death, and detachment from women is compared to immortality. Another example is when Lord Shiva, then after that, desires to see. So this story actually goes on. It's so interesting how the Bhagavatam's Leelas, they mix with one another like this. So after this happens, and the whole universe was testament to the fact of Lord Vishnu's enchanting beauty, that just because of his form as Mohini, he was able to take the greatest, the most valuable material thing in this world, that is nectar, away from the demons. After that, Lord Shiva wanted to see it. And generally, an ascetic, a great ascetic, never wants to see a beautiful woman, right? Because they'll fall in Maya. A sannyasi never sees a beautiful woman, aside from maybe for service, for some, just to speak to them or something, but never asks to see a beautiful woman. But Lord Shiva, thinking, wow, this, what this must have been extraordinary, this beauty, and also becoming a little proud, thought that I want to see this form of Lord Vishnu. So he requests Lord Vishnu, please show me this form. And then when he comes as Mohini Murti, Lord Shiva begins to run after Mohini Murti, and he loses all of his sense, and he falls prey to her charming beauty. And when this happens, Mohini Murti, she Lord Shiva is running after her, but she says, not only will I not let Lord Shiva touch me, but she runs through all the hermitages where the sages live. It's described in the Bhagavatam. Through all the the hermitages of the sages, and through the Himalayas and all these places, just to embarrass Lord Shiva, but not just for that, to give all the sages a great lesson. And the lesson is that never become proud of your asceticism. Because Lord Shiva became a proud, he now fell to my Maya. And no one is beyond. No one can be beyond the form of Maya and the form of woman. And so don't no one is free from this. And then through this process, she teaches all the sages that this is, you could say, the greatest challenge for any living entity in this material world. So even Lord Shiva becomes enchanted by Mohini's beauty. So therefore, what does the Bhagavatam say? The Bhagavatam says, this is in 3rd canto, 31st chapter, he who has attained self-realization by my service and desires to attain the highest stage of yoga should never associate himself with women, for they yogis call woman the gate of hell. A woman is the Maya created by God. She slowly approaches you. You should look upon her as your death, like a deep pit covered by grass. Right? It's a very heavy statement here. Here saying woman is the gate of hell, and you should look upon her as your own death, as a deep pit covered by grass. So this is the warning to the sages, to the saints. And then he says later on in Bhagavatam says, who with the exception of the sage Narayan, who else in this world is not attracted by Maya in the form of a woman? Behold the strength of my Maya in the form of a woman. By the mere movement of her eyebrows, she tramples underfoot the conquerors of the quarters of the world. So this is what the Bhagavatam is saying. Now, on the other hand, Bhagavatam has verses in which the Bhagavatam warns women about being attracted to men. And this is a verse from in the same canto, same chapter, spoken by Kapil Dev. And this says, one who, due to attachment to woman, attains the female gender, in delusion considers Kṛṣṇa's Maya, in the form of a man as her husband, the bestower of wealth, home, and children, should recognize the illusion of the self as having the nature of husband, home, and children, one that is death brought about by fate, just as the singing of the hunter is death for the deer. So here they're saying that one who has become a woman and who considers her man, her husband, to be the bestower of wealth, home, and children, she should recognize that husband of having the nature of Kṛṣṇa's Maya, and one that is death brought about by fate. Not just husband, but husband, home, and children. All of this, she should consider that to be Kṛṣṇa's Maya. Making it clear that the problem here, the Maya, many times people misunderstand, and this is the point I want to make, is that people misunderstand that woman herself is Maya. No, that is not the case. It is the attraction to the female form for the man that is the Maya. And similarly, the Bhagavatam here is saying that the attraction for a man, a woman's attraction for a man, is Maya for the woman. Then this is a very nice verse. This is said by Queen Rukmini, where she only wants to marry Kṛṣṇa. And she's being pressured by her father, by her brother, and by all of her family members to marry some materialistic king who is very powerful and wealthy. So Queen Rukmini, this is in the 10th canto, chapter 60 of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, text 45. She says, that woman is extremely foolish, who, without smelling the honey of Krishna's lotus feet, picks a lover who is a living corpse, covered in skin, nails, and facial, body, and head hair, and with gas, bile, belgum, stool, bowel, and worms, bone, blood, and flesh inside. So if any man has pride over his body, or proud of being a man, Queen Rukmini immediately destroys it. She says, that woman is extremely foolish, who without smelling the honey of Krishna's lotus feet, picks a lover who is a living corpse. Right? This body is just a corpse, and we become so proud of it. I'm a man, I'm a woman. The real person is the soul inside, which is neither man nor woman. Or rather, we should say that is all women. All the souls are female. So she's saying, what is this man? It's this man, this physical body of the man is just blood and flesh. The real man, the real person to surrender ourselves to serve, to consider our husband is Lord Sri Krishna. And this then brings us to our point in this verse, that who is the real husband? So here it's being said that the wife should serve her husband, but both the husband and wife need to understand that who is that real husband? There's a story in the Krishna book, as we all know, in the Bhagavatam, of the Brahmanas and the wives of the Brahmanas. And we all know this story. When the cowherd boys come to the Brahmanas do not give anything to the cowherd boys to eat, but then they go to their wives, the Brahmanas' wives, and the cowherd boys ask them. And when they hear that Krishna wants to eat something, they take all types of foodstuffs from their home and they go to the forest to meet Lord Krishna. And here it's being described in the Bhagavatam, this scene. Taking along a great variety of the 4 types of food in pots, the Brahmanas' wives surged forth to meet their beloved, like rivers to an ocean. This analogy is given many times in Bhagavatam. Like rivers to the ocean, from all the different homes, the Brahmanas' wives came forward with food in their pots. Although they were obstructed by their husbands, brothers, relatives, and sons, their hopes of meeting Krishna had long been sustained by hearing about him. Right? So they then go there and then they meet Krishna. And there they give Krishna these most tasty foodstuffs, and Krishna becomes so pleased by their service. It's described that they were attracted to Krishna because they'd heard so much about Krishna. And due to hearing about Krishna, like all of you are doing here in this call, their attraction for Krishna was so strong. And when they come and meet Krishna, then Krishna calls them truly learned. He says, there's no doubt that those who are learned and who understand their self-interest engage in selfless, uninterrupted bhakti to me, because I am the one who is dear to their souls. Right? So he says, you are actually learned, not your so-called learned husband Brahmanas. And then after praising them and accepting their service, Krishna tells the Brahmanas' wives to go back home. Just go back home now. Your duty is done. Go back home and help your husbands in the performance of the sacrifice, in the performance of yajnas. And the wives of the Brahmanas are living in a culture where if they disobey or go against their husbands and leave them to go to another man who is Krishna, when they go back, they'll be rejected or they'll be punished. So they tell Krishna, and not just for that, but also because they're completely in love with Krishna and they're seeing Krishna face to face, and their eyes, hearts, minds are completely fixed on Krishna. They cannot believe the fact that Krishna is asking them to go back home. First of all, they sacrificed everything, transgressed every rule, even though they came from the highest class families to come and see Kṛṣṇa. And now Kṛṣṇa is telling them to go back home. So then they tell Kṛṣṇa, you should not speak to us in such a cruel fashion, O Lord. Abide by your own doctrine, that you are the sole and most dear object of all living beings. So they tell him that you're telling us to go back and serve our husbands, but you are the soul in all living beings. Kṛṣṇa is the soul in all living beings in the sense that he is the soul of the soul. He is, he is what gives our soul energy, just like the soul gives the body energy. It is Kṛṣṇa who is actually the source of our soul. So he is actually our true husband. So they're saying, abide by your own doctrine. You're saying that we should go home and serve our husbands. But if that is the case, then who is our husband? You are our husband. So let us serve you. So many people have noticed, our acharyas, and even you could say just scholars, mundane scholars, that the Bhagavatam, it supports the norms of, the norm of Vedic culture of the wife and the husband, and the wife serving the husband. But at the same time, it gives us a nuance to that dharma is true. It says that the dharma of the wife is to serve her husband and be with her husband and support her husband. But that dharma is modified in the context of bhakti. Why? Because that dharma is done towards the husband who is Kṛṣṇa. The dharma still stays, but if the ultimate husband is Kṛṣṇa, then the idea is that both the husband and wife must serve Kṛṣṇa. And they're serving each other as a way of serving Kṛṣṇa, and they're serving Kṛṣṇa as a way of serving each other also. So the focus of Kṛṣṇa is there, and therefore neither the husband or the wife thinks that they are a master. So there's no contradiction to the dharma. That duty is there, but the idea is that what does it mean to fulfill that duty, and that must be understood really nicely. And once the Brahmanas realize that how their wives have pleased Lord Kṛṣṇa, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then the Brahmanas, once the wives come back, they not only accept their wives back, but they curse themselves. They say curses on that birth, which is threefold, curses on vows, curses on extensive learning, curses on our family lineage, curses on skill and rituals. We still remain averse to Adhokshaja, Kṛṣṇa. Truly, the Maya of Kṛṣṇa bewilders even the yogis. Because of it, we, the Brahmanas, the gurus of humanity, are confused about our own self-interest. Aho, see the unlimited devotion of these very women for Kṛṣṇa, the Guru of the world. It has pierced the fetters of death under the guise of household life. Neither the sanskara, purificatory rites of the twice born, nor residence in the house of the Guru, nor austerity, nor inquiry into the self, nor rites of cleanliness, nor auspicious rituals were practiced by these women. Nonetheless, they were constant in devotion to Kṛṣṇa, the Lord of the Lords of Yoga, whose glories are renowned. This was not the case with us, even though we had undergone sanskara and other such rites. Aho, how fortunate we are to have wives such as these. Their devoutness has given rise to unwavering devotion to Hari in us. So here we see that the Brahmanas, the wives of the Brahmanas, they're cursing themselves, and they're saying how fortunate we are to have wives such as these, who are inspiring devotion within us, who are bringing us closer to Kṛṣṇa. And this is the mood of the Bhagavatam, that actually we see in the Bhagavatam, the greatest exemplars of devotion in the Bhagavatam are generally women. And finally, as a final reflection, we all know a very similar situation happens with the gopis of Vrindavan. When the gopis go to the forest to meet Kṛṣṇa, then they take the greatest risk and transgression, and they disregard their society at the risk of being kicked out for the rest of their life. This was a culture in which, if you did this once, you would never be accepted in society again. I mean, it had serious consequences in a way that we don't understand today, which you see sometimes happening. But it was like the case of Amba, where we see in the Mahabharata, where once she was taken by Bhishma, no one in the whole society would marry her. She had to, just be a nomad, of an ascetic in the forest. So the gopis do this, and then they come to the forest, and Krishna tells them, "Go back home." They come to the forest, and Krishna says, "Go back home," and they say, "We have no place to go to." And then Krishna tells them similar instructions, just like we said, that there's no higher duty for the wife than to serve her husband, to take care of her family, to serve her children. And then to this, the gopis respond in literally the exact same words that the Brahmana's wives respond. They say that, "Then let this be our dharma. If it's our dharma to serve our husbands, then you are our true husband. And let us serve you, because you are indeed our true husband and our true master." So the gopis are therefore glorified by the greatest chaste women in the world, like Parvati, Arundhati, all of these ladies, for being the most chaste women, because they served Lord Krishna. They actually served their husband, who was Lord Krishna. So with this sort of understanding of the general message of the Bhagavatam, how the Bhagavatam is not on the material level, it's on the spiritual level. With that understanding, we can appreciate this verse. And with that understanding, we can understand that the Bhagavatam is being literal here. Yes, it is the duty of the wife to serve her husband, and it is the duty of the husband to serve, facilitate, and serve and protect his wife. That is not being undermined. That is the dharma. But that dharma is always in relation to Krishna. And when we have that in our context, when we are aware of that, then we cannot misuse this principle, because both are servants of the Lord. And there's one, just small, you could say, example of His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, where he gives this example in one of his lectures, that he was counseling a husband and wife. And when in counseling them, he said that each one of you should think that you are the servant of the other. And so he said, then after they left the room, then he overheard them speaking, and he said, "See, Maharaj was saying, you're my servant." And the other said, "No, he is saying, you're my servant," like this. So that's the problem, that we can read scriptures in both ways, and we can find quotes very nicely at both points. But when we understand that we are both servants of Krishna, then this makes perfect sense, that the husband should perfectly serve her, the wife should perfectly serve her husband. Why? Because she's trying to serve Krishna. It really doesn't have much to do with the fact that this is her husband. In the same way, the husband should be very ideal, like Lord Ram, and be willing to. Prabhupada says in that section of the Ramayana, so these are the duties of the husband, so to say. Prabhupada says in that section of the Ramayana in the Bhagavatam, that the husband should be willing to go to any end of the earth to take care of his wife. So Lord Ram, he crossed the ocean, you could say the bridge, and went to this island full of demons and asuras. Why? Just to take care of his wife, right? To protect his wife. And that is the example that Lord Ram is giving, that the husband should be willing to go to any point to do his duty towards his wife. So it's a very responsible culture. Recently, I was taking a short course, and it was like, you could say on Indian thing, it was just an academic thing I had to do. And in that, the instructor was criticizing Lord Ram for being, misogynistic. This is an academic thing. They criticize always. Scriptures are misogynistic. The deities are misogynistic. The gods, so to say. So Ram was very misogynistic. And I just made this point. I made this point that, okay, that is one side of it. But what about the other side? That when Sita was gone to the forest, he banished Sita to the forest because of the Raja Dharma, the duty of a king. He put that first. But Lord Ram was crying every night for Mother Sita. It's described in the Ramayana, it's there in the text, that he was in great separation from from Sita Devi. And it's not that he was living in great pomp. It's described he was sleeping on the floor because he was thinking that Sita is living in the forest. He also could not enjoy anything in his kingdom, it's described. And he was acting simply as a way to be an ideal king. And he was the emperor of the whole world without any question. And it was very customary at that time for even small kings, not what to speak of emperors, to have many wives. Yet he had that vow. He kept that vow till the end of his life, that he would just have one wife. He stayed truthful to Sita. And before Sita is banished, he tells Sita, he says that I am being an ascetic here as a king. Anyone in leadership knows that a leadership position is worse than being in the forest, right? It's very lonely, and it's like being an ascetic, great austerity. If you're actually a great leader, it's very terrible. So I'm an ascetic here, and you be an ascetic in the forest. And there you practice penance and austerity there. So it was sort of a mutual agreement between the husband and wife, between Ram and Sita. And Sita also voluntarily agrees to it. She, being a great queen, a very noble girl from a king family, being a princess, she knew the importance of being a king and a queen. She said, yes, this is my sacrifice for the kingdom. So he didn't force her to do it. She did it voluntarily. And so they both are so to say, doing their austerity, and in this way, acting in that way. And when the Rajasurya sacrifice happens and Sita is not there, then everyone expects that Lord Ram will marry now again. Because to do the sacrifice, the yajna, the king has to have a wife. But then what does Lord Ram do? He makes a golden form of Sita and he puts it there. He says, no, my wife, I had to send her, I had to do this, but she is still faithful to me and she's still my wife and I am her husband. So she'll sit next to me, but in the form of this golden statue. So he was not misogynist, Lord Ram. That was his sacrifice. Okay, he had, in fact, he was trying to fight against the norm of, you could say, of that civilization. And one point in the Ramayana, one factual point is that at the end, it's almost giving a message that's very interesting, that's opposite to what, even materially, academically speaking, what was the norms of society, where the whole then citizens, they have to apologize. They apologize to Mother Sita at the end. The way it ends is that Sita Devi sort of wins the argument. And at the end, they have to apologize to her. Right? They all come begging forgiveness from Mother Sita. So in some ways, the Ramayana is reflecting on the situation of society, that how do we treat our women? That they're kept at such a higher standard. If they go and they're away from the husband for some days, then when they come back, they have to walk through fire. But Lord Ram did not have to walk through fire when he was separate from his wife. So what is this double standard? Why we're expecting them to take sati and all these things? And so it's reflecting on it, and it's saying that, look, this is wrong. And Sita Devi, through her example, was showing this. And as a final point, I should mention that in the Bhagavatam, also in this section of Puranjana, when Puranjana reincarnates, he comes back as Vaidharbi. And then when her husband Malayadhwaja dies, then she's about to enter the fire and take sati, right? Which was a very common, you could say, custom in ancient Vedic culture. And then Kṛṣṇa comes in the form of a Brahmana, and he comes to Vaidharbi, and he stops her. And he says, out of attachment, why are you doing this foolish thing? Don't you remember me, your unknown friend, who have always accompanied you, the Vigyata Sakha? And rather than going into the fire with your husband, why don't you worship me? Why don't you remember me and pray to me? So one level we see karma kanda, that this was the mode of goodness, that you could say this culture that the wife would follow her husband to the heavens and Vaikuntha, all these things. But then Bhagavatam is higher than karma kanda. It's telling them, look, I'm your real husband. I'm your unknown friend, Kṛṣṇa. Why don't you worship me? And you follow my thing. So he admonishes her, he chastises her. So that's an indication that the Bhagavatam didn't support the practice of sati, because it's higher than, you could say, someone remarrying or someone, forgetting their husband, but it is the highest thing is actually worshiping Krishna. So this is the you could say the teaching of the overall, you could say, message of the Bhagavad on this topic, as far as I understand. So I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Hari Prabhu. We're so grateful. So
Thank
many
you.
wonderful.
I'm sorry I went maybe very long. I had a lot to say on this topic, but I was maybe going fast.
Absolutely not, Prabhu. It's always such a nectar to hear from devotees like you. So we'll see if devotees would like to share any comments or questions. You can raise your hand. So accordingly, we can balance the time. And there, let's say 5 devotees or 10 devotees want to ask. So accordingly, you can raise your hand. It helps to keep the flow going. Yes, Bhadra Prabhuji, please, you can go ahead. You can unmute yourself, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Gopal.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam.
Dhanavad, how are you?
Good, Prabhu. I didn't see you. I didn't realize that you were here the whole time. Otherwise, I would have been. I would wanted to hear from you. I'm so sorry, actually. This is.
Well, first of all, offer my obeisances to your parents. Okay, I haven't seen them for a long time, and one request is that next time you plan both brothers to come to parikrama. You used to come for how many parikrama you did? So
3.
now you both come, and we will just hear a whole month to both of you. Both of you, brother, give the classes every day. So plan it for next year.
It'll be your mercy if I can do that. Actually, I miss it so much, and those are some of my fondest memories in life.
Yes, so plan it if you can, please. My question to you is that the families are eternal, devotees' families are eternal, and I can see in my life it has actually happened. But then on the other side, Queen Kunti is saying to break up the ties, and her 5 sons, they are the devotees of the Lord, very dear devotees, and she's telling to break up the ties between them. So can you kindly give me some enlightenment on that part?
Yes, Prabhu. Actually, this is a very nice point that you're mentioning. And Prabhupada, in that purport itself, the verse of Queen Kunti, which you're saying, Sneha Pasham Imam Chindi, Vidam Pandushu Vrishnishu, that please cut the tie of affection from the Pandavas and Vrishnis. In that very verse in the purport, Prabhupada responds to this very point that you're saying. And he says how Queen Kunti here is praying for cutting the material bondage, the material attachment towards her kinsman. And Srila Prabhupada specifically makes the point that the relationship that she had as devotees with the Pandavas, who were the greatest devotees of the Lord, that was completely spiritual. And he says that is very good. That was actually a great asset. But she is not asking for breaking that connection, but she's asking, please break this connection of the pride that I have, the conditioning that I have of thinking that I belong to this family of the Pandavas and Vrishnis, this very noble family. Therefore, I'm a very noble woman. Therefore, I should be respected, and I'm a queen. Those things, being the greatest family on earth at that time, were very deeply rooted. You could feel. I mean, if someone came from that family, what a designation that would have been. So she is specifically praying, and Prabhupada specifically makes this point in that purport, that cut that material attachment, which is very hard to cut. And but her relationship with the Pandavas, Prabhupada says, was a completely spiritual, eternal relationship.
So how is that gonna, what should we pray? Because we are in the family societies now, and we have the families, and they are also devotees. So how we should pray?
Yeah, no, actually, this is why we have to go through Varna Ashram. And sometimes, if devotee families are spiritual, then one may ask that why is the system of sannyas there? Why is the man in that devotee family, you could say, in a very ideal situation where the devotee family is there, everything is very nice? Why will the man still take sannyas, as we see in Vedic culture, where they would leave their loving devotee family and go to the forest? The reason is because the material attachment, the material bondage is so strong that sometimes the physical separation helps. Or Kṛṣṇa may arrange that physical separation so that material attachment breaks. So I think my understanding is that we don't have to pray for anything separately. When we're chanting every day, when we're praying to Lord Kṛṣṇa, please engage me in your devotional service. If that family attachment is an obstacle in our spiritual life, then Kṛṣṇa himself will bring that detachment in our heart, or will arrange for that situation. And if it's not an obstacle, if we truly are performing our family life in such a way that we're fully Kṛṣṇa conscious, then Kṛṣṇa may just, keep us together in this life and keep us together in their next life. But I think whatever happens in this life, if the family members are devotees, then it seems from this verse, and that's why, it is a very fascinating verse. I had forgotten about this verse, that in our future life, most likely, Kṛṣṇa will arrange that those devotees serve each other again in the spiritual, serve Kṛṣṇa in the spiritual.
Thank you, Gopal.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah.
I have one more question, but I will ask you later if there is a time.
Thank you, Prabhu. Just to Prabhu clarify this point, so in the Bhagavatam, we also see that the relationship, like husband, wife, brother, sister, they are like two sand particles coming together, and then the next wave never to meet again. And at one point, there is mentioned the two particles of like twigs of grass in a whirlpool, they meet for some time and never to meet again. So just to understand rightly, that's for material relationship, but the spiritual side is eternal. Is that the right way?
Yes, that is also my understanding, that's true of all relationships in this mature world. So friend and friend meeting, right? Us meeting our boss, and we all have some karmic tie with these people, right? Our boss is our boss and we are his servant because in our past life, we had to pay some dues to this person. Otherwise, Kṛṣṇa could have made us the boss and that person the servant. So the Bhagavatam is saying any relationship in this material world is like two specks of dust coming together. Some karmic things bring us together, it's temporary, it'll vanish. But any spiritual relationship, and this is not just family relationships, but even relationships amongst devotees, the relationship with our spiritual master, particularly our spiritual masters, our devotee friends, these are clearly more eternal in nature. And how they are eternal because they're on the level of the soul. So any service is always eternal. So in some sense, it's just eternal. But the point is that like how much we serve together in the spiritual, that's up to Kṛṣṇa. You see, so we could actually have a very, very loving relationship and devotee relationship with a family member, but if in the spiritual world we're all in love with Kṛṣṇa, it may not even matter to us whether or not we're serving with them again in the same way we're doing it now, in the same way that it matters to us now. But the Bhagavatam is giving us the assurance that if it does matter to us, don't worry. In the spiritual world, you'll go on serving together.
Thank you, Prabhu, for clarifying. Yes, Raghunandan Prabhu, you want to share or ask something?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for such a nice talk and pulling together different principles and pastimes from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It's like I took a journey all over Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and drank in the nectar. Thank you so much. And also you mentioned a very important point of taking things in context, and there is normally a tendency with the intellectuals to just zoom in on certain points and then blow it out of context. Thank you for mentioning that point. I have a slightly sensitive question to ask. Sorry to put you in the spotlight, but it's not controversial. Um, um, Generally, we see like the scriptures, the Vedic culture talks about a man and a woman. Um, at the same time, we see instances where a man has many wives, and in the case of Draupadi or in the case of Prachetas, they had many husbands were married to a single woman. So from that, I see that even though there were certain rules and regulations, there were an appropriate way to adjust some exceptional situations. And the reason I'm quoting that context is we are living in a world where we are more and more hearing about same gender marriage and so on. And we do not come across such things in the Vedic culture, but they are spirit souls, and they also might be interested in practicing Krishna consciousness. So how do we adjust this conception, because this is the world that we are living in right now, and it's becoming a more and more common concept, and it's also being made legal in many countries and many states within the USA. So I would like to hear your thoughts about that.
Yes, I think these same principles would apply in the case of polygamy and polyandry. That like in the case of Draupadi and her husbands, and the other way around, where many wives and one husband. That if they are all devotees, then the focus is serving Krishna, but they have their different roles in the material world. And a very important point to note here is that in previous times, polygamy was necessary because nature's way is such that there's more female children born than male children. It's just nature's way. If there's no abortion or this artificial forms of contraception, then that's the way it will be. In India, there's many you could say what's the technical term they say, infanticides. They of the female children, and that's why the ratio is changing. But before there was more. So for those who were part of royalty and they had so much wealth, they would redress that imbalance in society by accepting more than one wife, because they had the resources to take care of them. And this way they could also have a husband. But it was not so commonplace amongst the normal citizens. So those cases, just in general point, were actually still quite exceptional. Like, the kings would have it, but just every villager would not have more than one wife, because there are some women that that could not find husbands, and so the kings would almost do that service of having more than one wife. So that's one important point in this, and therefore we see in the case of the Draupadi and the Pandavas how even in that situation one can be an ideal devotee, one can serve the Lord very nicely, and one can be devotees. So there's really no problem. There's no problem. But the point is that the principle of polygamy has to be applied properly. Then there's no problem. If a normal person, just like in India, some people think that even it's just anyone can do it. It's your decision. But really, in Vedic culture, Prabhupada made it very clear: only a man who can support more than one wife has a right to take more. And similarly, there are situations where a woman would take more than one husband, which was very, very rare. I mean, really rare. So that's there. And then in terms of same-sex marriage, there's actually narrations in the Bhagavatam of this, like the story of King Sudamnya, where he would change gender every month. He had some curse and he would change gender every month. You'd be a man, woman, like this. It is, you could say, it is a situation that can also be Krishna conscious. Everything can be, in every situation, a person can be Krishna conscious. But the the same. It's just, I guess we've, devotees already say this, that the same principles would apply there. That there would only be, you could say, the relationship has to be for service to Krishna. So then the physical relationship, even between husband and wife, has to go away. I mean, and go away in the sense that that has to become completely unimportant. That's the only way it gets spiritualized. So if that's the case, then if there's a relationship same sex, then it becomes a friendship, and that friendship becomes a friendship to serve Krishna. Like, I know this one lady, she's an elderly lady, and she has a female partner, and they're in their 70s, but clearly it's just a friendship because they're in their 70s, and it is truly just a friendship. They live together, but that's the relationship she's always had. And it's actually a fact that in Kali Yuga, those relationships are increasing, because they've done actually studies where due to drugs, that in the womb, the sex can change. Yeah, so a person who's a man can become a woman physically, even the mentality, it stays. And that's due to, there's a direct relationship between drugs and that happens. So as the consumption of drugs increases, that happens, and it's not really their fault. It's just they're born with it. It's actually a biological medical thing, that if the parents take drugs at that time, the child will grow up like this. And it's actually a very painful situation for them, because they don't want it like that, but their body is of a man, but their mind is of a woman, and they wish it would be the other way around. So we have to, spiritual life means time, place, and circumstance. So we have to adjust, but the principles still remain the same. That relationship is simply based upon Krishna, on serving Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, Nandini Mataji, you want to share something? You are on mute, Mataji. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry. A very nice class, Gopal Hari Prabhu. It was so sweet. And another few things about Gopal Hari Prabhu. He was #1 book distributor in North America for a few years. And he has built this Indianapolis temple in a year, which is record for ISKCON Society. It's paid off, and it's beautiful, and it's attracting so many souls. And his sweetness, we used to go to Boise Temple just to hear his kirtans. So I really miss your kirtans, Prabhu. Really quick question. Prabhu, when we in ISKCON families, generally some girls don't get educated. But then if they are not educated, and if they unfortunately become single women, it becomes a disaster for them. So what is the balanced way of educate? What is your approach, your thoughts on this topic? How can women be still taught to be self-sufficient if needed, and then taught to leave all those educational qualification and just leave her job and everything if there's need for a house to be supported? What are your thoughts? Hare Krishna.
My wife is actually a dentist, and so she went through a lot of studies, a lot of education, and her father wanted her. And my mother the same way. When she was in India, her father had her do a few degrees. And then once the children come, my experience was that then they themselves don't want to work at that time, because the child stays with the mother for 9 months, and there's such an intense bond between the child and the mother. And as much as I try, I cannot replace the mother's role. It's like there's no way to give milk to the child or this or that. So it's very natural at that point for women to want to give up their job until the children are like, at least 5 or 6 years old. And so I think, in my personal opinion, and this is just my personal opinion, there's no, there's so many different ways and to work out a situation. My personal opinion is that a woman, girl, ladies should get educated. They can get educated. And then when the right time comes, then they themselves know that this is a good time for me to stop working and take care of the children, because they really need the mother. I mean, it's, there is just no replacement for them for the child. The man cannot do the role that the mother does. And so that will naturally come. That will naturally be there. So a lot of it depends upon the nature of the girl. There's just like there's different natures amongst boys, there's clearly different natures amongst girls also. Some girls are not interested in working. They want to go into music, art, dance, and they only envision themselves as someone at home, and that's their nature. And so maybe they will get an education, but not in something that really is for a career in mind. But they'll still have an education if they need to work, like you're saying, in that way. Others may want to do a career, but they may want to do it for a few years, just as something to experience, and then they'll stay at home. But I think Prabhupada is clear on one point, is that the children need the mother. And in that way, the primary duty at that time is for the mother to take care of the children. He said in many different ways. He said for the they are like her deities, all these things, and you see that I've seen families in which they've tried to switch it, where the man stays at home, the woman works when the children are small, and it sometimes doesn't work really well, because the man's psyche is such that they don't provide that thing that the children at that age, when they're 1 or 2 years old, what they need. So that would just be my general perspective on it. I think the overall teaching of Srila Prabhupada is that Yukta Vairagya, right? That we have to engage everything in Krishna's service. So we have to see, what is realistic, what is practical, so that we can continue serving Krishna in all circumstances.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Yes, Vamsi, let's Prabhu. I think Bhakta Prabhu wants to comment on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gopal Hari Prabhu. A very nice class. So many wonderful points, and very practical and very difficult topic. How wonderfully you have given a lot of insight to us. The one side that I'd like to hear about is in this verse and the topic you covered today. It was mostly about a devotee family, and it's like a good hierarchy of devotees, where the lower position always serves the higher position, so that ultimately it reaches Krishna, because it's flowing that way. Like the Brahmin is served by the Sudra, and the husband, a devotee husband, is served by the devotee wife. So in the modern day, we might not find the same situation every time, where maybe the person in a higher position is not a devotee. So how can sometimes we see that kind of sometimes can become a little abusive, where the higher position person is exploiting. We see about slavery in America and all the movement that's going on now. So that service attitude sometimes can become detrimental for the progress of the person who is in that low position wanting to serve. So what would you think the message should be to a person who's getting exploited, but he still wants to be in that subordinate position to serve the Lord? So
Yes.
I want to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you so much.
Prabhu, actually, I was thinking about this point, because in this section, there's also some very heavy, so to say, verses about the Shudra serving the Brahmana, and how the Shudra, it said, should not think of anything else other than service to a higher caste, right? It says in one section that he should just choose one, either Vaishya or Kshatriya or Brahmana, and should just serve them. And you think, like, it just like, how is this possible? Like, okay, it sounds very good if I'm a Brahmana or Vaishya, but what if I was a Shudra? Is there no future? Like, is there no sense of freedom or this? And that's where the nuance comes in. Like, when you actually read the scriptures very detailedly, and when you if we knew what that culture, what that civilization was in a very detailed way, then we could really appreciate what some of these statements mean. And the reason I say this is because I came across this many times in different stories, in different situations, that you read it and it seems so disturbing, and then later on someone explained it to me more deeply, or I found some other greater, you could say, expansion of it, and it's like, oh, okay, this is what it meant. This is why it was reasonable or sensible for people to act in this way. And I'm trying to think of an example. There's one example that I had recently, but it slips my mind. So in Vedic culture, the Brahmanas and that civilization was, this is the example that came to my mind. Just like servants in India, right? You have the caretakers, and then you have the householders and their servants. If you try to verbally explain it to someone in America, that this person literally lives in the family as a servant, and then you have the landowner, or the householder there, and what that relationship is, it's like, how could anyone, it sounds like racism, casteism, like the worst thing in the world. But when you go there actually and you see what that relationship is, and how that was a relationship of sweetness in the right context, in the good culture, then you see, okay, this is actually how it played out, which is different than the way it's said. To give you an example, like my grandfather on my maternal side, he had a few families that would come and do service. He had a nice big shop, and he had cows, like he was wealthy. And so he had a few servants. And I personally saw that there was such a loving relationship between his family and the people who were helping him, right? Like, who were taking care of his house, his shop, and his cows. And when their children, when they needed to get married, he would arrange for the whole wedding of the servants, just like he would do for a son and daughter. Not that much money. He wouldn't put so much money into it, but he would take care of them. He would make sure that, are they choosing a good husband? He would go and, put in a good word for the servant's family for that. It was so different than what we think of master and servant, like a slave. It was nothing like slavery. So that culture was so different. People were so good-hearted in previous ages that these things seemed natural. Being a servant of someone like that was like, I'll get a position, like what an honor. Like if we had the role of becoming, the personal caretaker of Bill Gates or something, it would actually be a stature position. I know one Indian, he works for the Hindujas, and he's a very wealthy person because he works for the Hindujas, even though he's sort of like, their assistant. So when we take that and we try to apply it in modern day, then it can turn into a situation of abuse. So we have to be careful of that. Do we know the details of that culture before we are very eager to apply it and say, oh, you're a Shudra, so your job is just to serve me? Do we know, sometimes we can see things superficially and idealistically without knowing Vedic culture in depth. And that is a mistake that can be made in terms of the caste system, like the different castes, the Varnas, or also in terms of men and women. That you see that people look at Vedic culture superficially and say, oh, the woman was the ideal wife, so this should be the case. But what about the extended family, right? The lady had an extended family of extended support at that time. Therefore, she could keep the house so clean and nice because there's someone to hold the children at that time. What about the the cows? What about, it was a whole package that came together. So we try to apply it as nicely as possible in our modern day. We try to apply the principles, but to apply all the details is sometimes just purely artificial. So that's how we can avoid that abusive situation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, Bhadra Prabhuji, you had a comment or some addition?
No, I had a Gopal.
Yes.
In the fourth canto, this is since we're talking about this family life. In the King Puranjan's pastime, I'm giving the classes on this pastime to one temple. I have to give a class right away at 10:30. In the chapter 25, text 41, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning about the rape. If you have heard that, you must have heard that.
Yes.
And I mean, I know during that time, rape is considered to be enticement or seduction. But in this today's present time, rape means completely a nonsense thing.
Yes.
So to you, I mean, you all are very educated, well-to-do, known in the society. I think you all need to put some word to the BBT that they can put some footnote. Because when the modern people then, when they will read Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and read rape, and they would think that what is this society is telling about, isn't it? So that's my kind of humble request to all of you. You all are you all are involved in the academic. You all are involved in ISKCON so deeply with philosophically, you all are philosophically well to do. So it would be nice to kind of mention that, because it's really very difficult to grasp, isn't it?
There's one girl here, American girl, at my university who knew about devotees before she came to the university, and she's wanting to become a devotee. She is becoming a very nice devotee, but she was literally, for many years, she didn't come to ISKCON because online and things she read about Prabhupada's statement concerning rape, like you're saying. And she said, I don't want anything to do with Prabhupada. And then we met, and she came to my office and she was like, I love ISKCON, but I just cannot understand this thing. Can you explain it to me? And so then I said, this is a big discussion in our movement. And you have to understand that Srila Prabhupada was riding in a culture that was so pure that, just a boy that was enticing a girl. And even in American culture, this is true. Even a boy that was enticing a girl, it was called rape. And Prabhupada was very clear at different points where, and the proof of this is that at different points, Prabhupada openly spoke against the physical rape. So he was clearly against it. That we also have proof of that. And so once she understood that, now she's so inspired. So I 100% agree that this is a huge problem. That if Prabhupada meant something else by that word, then just like we have edited his books, then we need to, so to say, take that word and put what Prabhupada meant. But it's very, it's not just, it's a ISKCON-wide discussion that, well, how can we change Prabhupada's words and all these things, and if we change this, then should we change 20 other things? But yes, it's actually an active discussion right now in the BBT. So maybe they will hopefully change things. But I 100% agree with you. I would also speak up on it if I ever had to. I know other devotees who are already speaking up on this, but yes. Thank you for pointing that out.
Swati Mataji, have a question? Or?
Yeah, I have a question. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Danvat Pranam. Thank you very much for the wonderful class, Prabhuji. I just had a small question. We have read in Canto 1 where we read that Yudhishthira Maharaj was leaving, and then all the Pandavas and then their wife Draupadi and Subhadra were also leaving. And in that text, Prabhupada was explaining that in every individual they have to fly their own plane. So how do we understand that in this context?
Yeah, no. So all the while you could say serving together in a Krishna conscious family, we at the same time have to remember that each one of us has to make our personal effort to remain Krishna conscious, to please Krishna, and to go back to Godhead. Because why this is so important, the wife may think, oh, I will just take care of the children and my husband, and because my husband is a devotee, my husband will take me back to Godhead. Which to a slight degree, this is what Prabhupada is saying. He's saying that, and in other places he's also said that if the husband is a devotee and the wife assists her devotee husband, then they both go back to Godhead. But what will happen is if my husband doesn't become a devotee, or maybe his mind changes, will I also lose my Krishna consciousness? So at the end of the day, and this is why that point of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is so important. At the end of the day, we have to remember that still that relationship with our husband is temporary. I have the duty to seek out Krishna and to be a good devotee, because my ultimate husband is Krishna and my ultimate wife is Krishna. So the point is that we can, yes, it's true. This is my duty, but we cannot become so overwhelmed. Yeah, this is what I said. We cannot become so overwhelmed or overcome by our present material situation that we forget the very deep, the most important, the eternal duty we have towards Krishna. And that's why every verse that talks about this point about husband serving wife, it says, if the husband is not sinful. Right? I think it was this verse, no, it was the previous verse in this section. It says that the wife should serve her husband in every way if he is not a sinner. Right? So why not even if he's a sinner? Well, because our first duty is towards Krishna. And in that duty, then our duty becomes towards our husband, because the husband role is one of, you could say, a spiritual, you could say, companionship, spiritual guidance. And so the wife connects to Krishna through her husband also. But each one of us has to fly our own plane. We cannot depend on anyone else, because if by chance they don't make it, then we can't let ourselves fall also. Ultimately, each one of us is responsible 100% for our own spiritual advancement.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think one last comment by Raghunandan Prabhu, and then we'll stop. Sorry, we've taken a lot of your extra time. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. Regarding the Shudra being a servant of a Brahmana, I think the aversion to that conception as came because of the dominance of one community over the other, or one group over the other, and they were not allowed to grow in that thing. But my understanding of the Varnashrama Dharma, and I would say like Srila Prabhupada instituted that within ISKCON itself, that when we are trained and guided by an elevated devotee, we can grow from, I am a Shudra and I can grow in that spiritual life and then can reach the stage of Brahmana.
Yes.
So that conception is being missed, then it leads into all these chaotic situations of casteism and dominance and so on. But if it's applied properly, then the actual thing is nobody remains a Shudra forever. They are encouraged and given the education and guidance and training to grow and become a Brahmana.
Yes. No, and that's a very nice point. That's the second point, that is by guna and karma. So it's not by birth. Anyone can become a Brahmana. At the same time, some people may have the nature of a Shudra. You see, so because of that nature, they may stay a Shudra and they may want to stay a Shudra. Yeah. So then, even then, they should be given full respect for their nature. That is like craftsmanship, being a carpenter, an artist. Mm-hmm. So that's both things are there. That one is guna and karma. There's no force, but Prabhupada said so many places that the leg is as valuable as the head, and is given as much respect and care and protection as the head. Of course, the head a little more, but pretty much almost the same. So that point people miss. That point is, yes, he's serving the other classes, but it doesn't mean that the Shudra was a lesser person. Yeah. See, yeah, that's the key point, and you brought this out very nicely here. That the Shudra is not a lesser person, right? And that's one thing that's nice about American culture. You could say Western culture is that the plumber who comes in your house is as respectable as the teacher who comes in your house, because there's a sense of dignity of a human person. The employees are working for the boss in a company, but in India the employees are really the employees. You're second class. But here there's the dignity of humanity, that an employee is in the employee role, that's their function, but they still have, theoretically speaking at least, an equal position with the boss as far as being a human being, as far as having that dignity. And I think that's what Vaishnav culture was, Vedic culture was, that the Shudra was doing the role of service, but he still had self-dignity. Thank you, Prabhu. Very nice.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. So I hope we didn't go way over time than your planned itinerary. So I would request all the Vaishnavas to please turn on their videos and audios to express gratitude to His Grace Gopal Hari Prabhu. His Grace by loudly chanting 3 times, Hari Bol, Hari Bol,
Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Grace Gopal Hari Prabhu ki Jai. Samaveta Gaur Bhaktavrind ki Jai.
Lord, the
Thank you.
devotees ki jai.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Please come again.
Thank you.
Pratarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyascha
Patitanam
Titanam
pavanebhyo
pavanebhyo
Vaishnavyo
Vaishnavibhyo
namo
Namo
namaha.
Namo Ananta Koti.
Thank you.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.